Hey, you like cars? We are back. We are back again. Another week, another pod, but I'm back in my normal location. I'm not traveling on the road. I mean, sometimes it can be fun. Sometimes it can be a tad bit annoying, honestly, because when I want to record something, I realize I'm not in my normal humble abode, my normal comfortable setting, but I'm back now. So we're all back to our normal scheduled program. CarQuicks Podcast, episode 88. We're getting close to 100, folks. We're getting close to 100, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's Cameron Biggs, your host again for another week. How are y'all doing out there? How are your friends, the family, the children, the loved ones? Are things going well? I hope they are. As I say, you're joining here with me on another episode, so I hope that I am giving you the proper entertainment and escape from some of the realities we have in this world. Sometimes you need a little bit of an escape plan, a little bit of something to dilute the nonsense that can kind of happen and infiltrate our lives. But I'm here to talk about what we love, and that is cars. Cars and SUVs and trucks. I know I say CarQuicks. I had somebody ask me this the other day. They're like talking about CarQuicks, and I go, you only cover cars or trucks? And I remember when I was thinking about a name for this whole channel and this whole idea, I kind of was like vehicles and automobiles, and it just kind of was like, how do you encompass everything? And I ended up just landing at CarQuicks because I was like, well, CarQuicks, truck, SUV. I mean, nobody's gonna, I know there's some specialty channels that say truck only or SUV or crossover and stuff like that, but it gets too in the weeds. And I'm like, if you say a car, we all know what you're talking about, whether it could be a truck or an SUV. But it was just something that I was discussing with someone who learned about my channel and asked me questions about it. And I was just giving them my, just my thought process on it. I said, I didn't think too far into it because, how are you going to come up with car, truck, quicks? Like, come on now, reckless. Anyways, let's talk about something really cool. Now, if you're well off, wealthy, basically, there's an opportunity to buy something that if you've played Gran Turismo, the kids, myself included, that grew up racing on PlayStation and playing certain games, there is a certain Mercedes-Benz that we all remember. If you played those games, when you see this picture of the CLK DTM Racer with the D2 livery on the side, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, because we all know this car because it's in Gran Turismo 3. It wasn't Gran Turismo 2 if you unlocked it, by ways of codes and all those things, but Gran Turismo 3, 4, this was a known race car. The CLK DTM with the with the D2 Mansonman, Mannsemann. I never knew how you pronounce it. I just know that livery was something that we always recognized from the car in the video game. And now you can buy the real life car. Now, the cost of it, the people that have the car for sale said that you can inquire, which basically means when you see something and it says inquire for the price, it means you can't afford it. It means I can't afford it because I'm not inquiring about anything. To give a little bit of a background on what we think it could cost, there was a previous version of the CLK DTM race car that sold in Paris for about $520,000, and that was because it was driven by a Marcel Fassler. So that had a racing pedigree. The interesting part about this particular CLK is that this never raced officially. This was made and commissioned and built out, but really all of its racing was digital, honestly. Like in the video games it raced, but in real life, it was more of like an exhibition type of exercise. It never really officially was racing and had that type of pedigree. There were versions of this car that did race, not this particular livery one, that were used in race events. So those are the ones that most people know when it has that pedigree. But one of the other interesting facts that I never knew was that livery was a German telecom company that originally was just a telecom company that eventually got bought out by Vodafone. I never knew that. I always wanted to know what D2 was. Like, we see it on the side, and I never knew what it meant. But I read this article talking about the sale and this opportunity to buy this, and they were like, it should be a telecom company. I was like, it took only 20 years for me to get this information. But if you have the means, which is clearly going to be north of probably $400,000, $500,000, you can go get a piece of history. Now, can you drive it on the street? I don't know. If it's old enough and it passes the 25-year mark, like in the US, you may be able to register this thing and just drive down the street. Now, it's a bona fide race car, so I don't think you're really going to be too comfortable. But if you're a collector of historic race cars, I mean, if I had the money, I most certainly would throw this in the collection because I've loved this car. I mean, I use this thing in Gran Turismo consistently to win races. I mean, this is one of the best handling cars in that entire game. So if you're thinking, if you got it, go and grab it. Or what would be really cool is I've seen a few times when people have modified CLKs to look like the DTM race cars. I think the CLK DTM race car aero kit is one of the best looking ones from that era, and really almost put the CLK on the map as like almost a sports car. I mean, it wasn't designed like that. A standard CLK looks regular, but there's a lot of things you can do to modify those to make them look really dope, especially if you get into like the Black Series one, which is, oh man, you want to talk about top notch fire. Black Series CLK. Now moving along, there's been like a list of news articles talking about what's been going on with Tesla owners and their cars. Now, if you own a Tesla right now, the block is hot, literally. Okay, the streets, they're not feeling you. People got their ideologies wrapped up into inanimate objects, cars, and what things are happening, and administrations and people, and whatever their opinion is about the man behind the Tesla cars, they're now attacking the cars. Maybe some people are being collateral damage if you're in the way of somebody throwing a Molotov at your window of your Cybertruck. I mean, unfortunately, it's just not a good look right now. So there's a bunch of Tesla that begin vandalized. There's been protests at the Tesla dealerships. It's been a wild amount of weeks. If you're a Tesla owner, folks have been slapping on different badges, calling them Toyotas. They got bumper stickers that said, "I bought it before Elon went crazy." This is a Ford F-150, which clearly, I mean, unless you don't have a clue about a car, you know good and well what a Cybertruck looks like. But I don't know why I don't even know why you would want to attack the car if you have an issue with the person behind who made the company. It's a weird place to be. I had a discussion with someone when I was at a little car meet in the Sunday mornings at Catalina in Houston, and they were talking about this, and it came up, and they asked my opinion on it, and they said, "What do you think about what's going on?" I always said, I'm like, do unto others what what you want done to yourself, right? As the saying goes. Not that wasn't verbatim, but I'm just paraphrasing, which is I'm not attacking somebody's car if I don't have the same opinion on whoever was the founder of the company. I'm not attacking their car. I'm not attacking their character. I mean, it's a car. It's an inanimate object. It doesn't mean that you believe in certain things that maybe you believe this person does. Because if that's the case, if we start talking about not liking or attacking companies whose CEOs and founders have different ideologies than ours and morality scales, it's gonna be a hard time out here, okay? Because I don't put nothing past any of these billionaires, millionaires, and these corporations. I mean, they're after making money. They may have a morality clause, or they might have something where they're trying to show that they care to a certain degree, but I never put it past them to be like, listen, when it comes down to getting to the almighty dollar, they're going to do whatever it takes to get there, however which way it happens. Now, all I'm saying is if you have a Tesla right now, just have your head on swivel, okay? Because they're out there burning them things down. They had another incident in Las Vegas. There's a bunch of them caught on fire. Now, the only problem with lighting a Tesla on fire, any electric car for that matter, is that they don't just burn like normal cars. When the batteries ignite, it causes a mass fire that burns for hours and hours. So it's just dangerous all around for people around the buildings that they're next to, because there's a lot of collateral damage that can happen just from trying to set one of them on fire. Head on swivel. Head on swivel if you're in one of them. Now, again, continuing on with the electric vehicle news that I was reading about this week. I know the Dodge Charger's been out. We've talked about it. They reviewed it. I haven't been in one yet. I do want to drive one, though, and one day I will. But the consensus on the Charger EV has been a mix of it's not good, it's decent, it is good if you approach it with the idea of what it was meant to do. But if you do want one right now, you can catch a deal because Dodge is already discounting them by $12,500. If you stack the incentives of the rebates There's another cashback program. So it's like 7,500 plus 3,000 plus another set of couple thousand for another package and another incentive they have. And altogether, if you sandwich it, it's like it's over $12,000 you can get off on a Charger EV, or you can get 0% APR plus like $5,000 cash back for the entirety of like 6 years for buying one of these EVs. Now, obviously, they're doing this because I can't imagine that they're selling at the pace that they would hope for them to sell. I saw all of 2 of these things on the road in Houston so far. I have barely seen any. There are Scat Packs and Chargers and Hellcats left and right, which tells you where the market was, where the people were buying the cars, where they're putting their money. And so, really, the reception of this is what I expected. I think it'll get better once the 4-door version comes out, when the Hurricane inline twin turbo 6 versions come out. I think when the 4-door with the turbo inline 6 and the 6-speed manual and even the automatic version, because most of the ones that I ever see are automatics. There's a rare few that are manual, especially when it comes to the Challenger. But once the 4-door Charger and the inline twin turbo 6 comes out, I think that's when the needle will kind of move back to a better place for Dodge when it comes to this Charger. The EV one, for me personally, on paper, just looking at the reviews, looking at the videos, I can see it can be enjoyable if you're coming at it under the idea of like, this is an electric car. Maybe you have an original Charger. Maybe you have a Hellcat in the garage and you're like, okay, give me something that can be efficient, quieter, or just easier to drive. Maybe I want to just cruise to the store, but I still want something that looks cool. And I think on the outside that the Charger EV looks dope. I think that it's only a few little bit of things away from looking absolutely crazy. Lowered wheels, things like that. I think the overall design is good, but I think the EV part of it is never going to be a resounding like Hail Mary of like success like the original Hellcats and Red Eyes. I think it's always going to be for a very niche group of people, which I'm just surprised that Dodge built so many of these that we're now at the point where they're talking about doing rebates at this level to get people to come in there and buy the car. We'll see what happens when the next one comes out. I believe if I'm going to wager anything, not that I bet or I'm not a gambling man, but if I was going to say when it's going to kind of uptick, when the twin turbo inline 6 comes in, when they make the 4-door one, especially when the twin turbo inline 6 comes in, when people see what the aftermarket does with that motor, that is when that pendulum is going to start swinging. Now, if they do what they said with the V8 and the RHO or the TRX, and they say we finally figured out a way to put the V8 in the new model, I do think they'll have a hard time trying to figure out the price point, because you got an EV, you got an inline twin turbo 6, and then let's say you figure out the V8 situation and you put it back in there. Is the V8 the top spec? Is it the middle spec? That's kind of some of the things they're going to have to battle and do. But, if you want a deal, you can catch a deal right now. Now, speaking about some other car companies that are trying to figure out the next wave of things to do to incentivize their bottom line and bring some money in, I was reading an article about McLaren, and they're talking about the McLaren SUV, and they're hinting at it coming. They're hinting at the fact that McLaren kind of got bought out by a new company, I think in Abu Dhabi, or just whoever's in mass shareholder is. They've hinted at getting back to developing the SUV. I'm not surprised. Like, Ferrari was one of the few holdouts that said we're never doing this. Now, they made what they call a sport activity vehicle, which is basically an SUV, but the Purosangue looks fire to me. I've seen one in the road. I've seen it driving. It looks dope. It looks very much like a sports coupe that sits a little bit higher. So by design, they kind of accomplish what it is that they're trying to do, not look like an SUV, but you are an SUV. So McLaren has talked about it before, but their former CEO, he infamously said, there's more than enough SUVs in the world. We don't need another one. Now, I'm not knocking what he said, because he's absolutely correct. There are more than enough SUVs to cater to every taste. High performance, rally, off-road, overland, grocery get, pick up the kids. I mean, whatever you want to do in an SUV, we got one for you. However, you can't take away from how much money these companies make when they make SUV versions of supercars or from supercar companies. The Lamborghini Urus is a perfect example. Not that the Audi, RQS8 isn't the exact same thing for cheaper, which, arguably some people say is better. But you saw what the Cayenne did for Porsche. You see what the Macan did for Porsche. I just read an article about the Macan EV being even a better sell than even I thought. I thought they were doing kind of bad. Come to find out, the Macan EV is kind of like paving the way. But they still want to make a electric version. But back to McLaren. And they want to make a gas version. But back to McLaren. This is usually money in the bank because the people that buy McLarens, the 720Ss, the Arturas, the Sennas, the Speedtails, all those supercars, those people already are buying into what McLaren does and they know what they do. If you add an SUV and they already were purchasers of like a 720S and they need another car or they wanted something to haul the family or something to just drive around daily in, it's hard to resist just keeping it in the family and saying, oh, well, y'all got an SUV for me. I already got a 765 LT. If I want a full-on supercar, high level of performance, I already got that. Now I want to kind of cruise, but kind of give me high performance too. Give me something that's a little bit better than the Urus, or give me something that competes with the Purosangue, or whatever electric, not electric, but whatever SUV is at a high performance level. For McLaren, the only benefit from having an SUV from any of these car companies is the fact that the money that you get from it allows you to fund other projects. That is how Porsche has been able to make GT3 after GT3 and GT2s and RSs and YSAC packages and 918 Spiders. The Cayenne and the Macan have been funding a lot of these things. And that is the same when it comes to even companies like Toyota. The GR series of cars, if the Highlander and the Siennas and the Camrys weren't the bread and the butter, then we wouldn't have a GR Corolla. There wouldn't be a GR Super. There would not be a upcoming GR Celica because there would be no money. So McLaren doing this isn't a bad idea. I'm intrigued, and I'm usually not intrigued by SUVs from exotic car manufacturers or supercar manufacturers because I'm always like, it just dilutes the brand to me. However, if there was a brand that I would be intrigued to see what they come up with, because I can't even wrap my head around the design language of what they would do because there isn't anything that they can kind of pull from. Like the Urus is based on what Audi does. The Purosangue is a brand new design too, so it was interesting to see that build up to see what Ferrari came up with. And McLaren's the same way. Does it look kind of like a 720S? A 720S or a 720 front end on the SUV looks foolish. That's not going to work. So I'm wondering what they do. Is it like high lifted, kind of like the Purosangue, which is not really an SUV, but almost wagonish in a way? Is it a full-on off-roader? Are they going all the way? Like, what do they do? But the fact that the article and the information is coming up again says that McLaren is talking about it because they can see the money. All the other companies have made money on every SUV that they've had when it comes to making something for high performance. We got Trackhawks, we have Uruses, we got RSQ8s, we have Purosangues, we have Durango Hellcats. Okay, I mean, like, there have been high performance SUVs. There's a Cadillac V series, giant ESV style with a supercharged V8. So high performance SUVs are a thing that sell and sell and sell. Now, continuing about McLaren, I do want to talk about the F1 race. So last week was the Australian GP. I did watch it. I'm not doing a full recap. I'm just saying that it was an interesting race because there's a whole lot of stuff happening. I was rooting for Ferrari. I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan. I've been a Ferrari fan. I was a Mercedes with Lewis. He's with Ferrari now. It was all one happy family. They did a whole bunch of bad calls towards the end, with pitting, with the rain tires. But McLaren and Lando Norris and Oscar came in and did their thing. And so it's looking good for them. Their first race, Lando got a podium. They're saying he's on his way to win the Drivers' Championship. We'll see this week when it comes to the race in China, especially when it comes to Ferrari, if they can get their communication and their strategy down, because I don't know what was going on at that race, but it was all types of foolery. But it was good to see that first race. Next one is this week. See how they perform, see how they do. Hopefully it's, a lot better than, what did they get in, 9th, 10th place? It was something abysmal. But we'll see what goes on. But moving along, I was talking previously last week about the S2000 that sold for like $95,000, right? And I said, we are now at the stage where the JDM Classics we love are top dollar. Well, the news that's starting to show up now is that these tariffs that the president has been putting out and kind of showing what he wants to do with these countries. I'm not about to have a discussion about tariffs, okay? I've read enough. Even some of it confuses me, okay? I'm not an economist. Now, the only thing that it does pertain to when it comes to cars is the JDM imports. And they said that the tariffs are now starting to affect some of those cars, the little K trucks. They said there's already like a 25% tariff on those. There's already tariffs that are starting to build up on imported any vehicle, Skylines, Silvias, RX-7s, Cosmos, old Toyota Crowns, Celicers, whatever it may be. If it's a JDM car that you want and it's not already sitting at one of the importers here in the United States and it's coming from overseas and you got to pay the tariff, if you got to pay a tariff on top of it and it was already an expensive proposition like an R34 Skyline, if you're paying for one of those and you're paying for like a GTT and it's like $50,000, $60,000, you might have to put another 10%, 20% on top of that. It's not looking good right now. What that tells me, if this is truly going to be the case and there is tariffs on imported JDM classic cars, whatever is sitting here in the U.S. is now going to go up in price. And whatever is in inventory is getting snatched up very quickly. And then whatever else comes in, they're probably going to have to move the price up. It's just not, I've said it before. If you want one of these cars, you essentially need to buy the car and you need to buy all the spare parts and you need to get the bank account ready because it's not going to be easy as the years pile on to have an old school Sylvia S15 and you need a spare part. If you have like a handle door switch that cracks, you're cooked. You're going to have to hit the auction, Japanese Yahoo, and try to get something shipped over. It's just... all it says is that it tells you that there's more and more that's going to come that affects that type of market, and it probably exasperates the price, jumps the price up, makes everything unobtainable, and also makes it whatever you do have rare, and now you got to protect it even more so. Like, I know that I haven't heard many articles, people stealing imported JDM cars, but maybe it's happening. But I know if there's a low supply, and you got one of the few things people want, now you got to protect this thing with, a Viper, something like that. Now, getting into further EV news, there wasn't much of standard vehicle news because that's just, it's quiet right now. But back on the EV front, Mercedes showed off the 2026 Mercedes-Benz CLA EV. Now, the EV portion of this is the fact that this is going to be an EV first, and later on it's going to be a hybrid. But what I was reading is that this is the most advanced EV that Mercedes made, which is interesting because I thought the EQS was that. But I guess it deals with their architecture for the fact that it's the 800-volt architecture, so it has a higher speed of recharging. This particular model has an 85 kilowatt-hour battery, 268 horsepower, a 349 horsepower version, 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds for that version. For the previous one, the 268 horsepower one is 6.6 seconds. Then talk about the top speed, but the range is somewhere between 367 miles to 418. If you get the higher performance one, it's 354 miles of range to 407. And the reason why I'm giving you that estimate and that range is because they haven't given the official EPA standards. We're using the European standards of how they do range. But if you convert it to the EPA standard, it falls into that range right there. Now, what I really want to discuss about this car, and you see this picture on here if you're watching the video, and if you're not, again, like and subscribe to the channel, follow the movement, okay? Now, I want to discuss this exterior. I want to discuss the design because I'm going to be frank here. I don't really like how this looks. And I don't understand why it looks this complicated in the front. The front end of this, the CLA to me always had a weird look because it was supposed to be like the baby version of the CLS. Like the CLS, the original CLS was like one of the most iconic designs, clean. It looked futuristic at the time. It looked ahead of its time. It looks clean now. It isn't overly dated. So now you have this newer versions of the CLS, and the CLA is supposed to look like the baby version of that. But this new version here, if you take a look at this front end, especially, we have like a 3-star pointed LED headlight. The grill is lit up with LEDs, the same kind of 3-star. They got the main one in the middle, and it looks like little small ones all around the grill. And then there's like this light bar that connects the front headlights, and it looks very aquatic. It looks like a catfish to me, or something with a mustache. It just doesn't look clean. And I don't know if that's to, differentiate the EV version from the hybrid version. Like they want to put the light bar on it to say this is an EV. And that goes back to what I said before about electric cars and design. In my last podcast, I said Audi does better than most companies when it comes to designing EVs because they don't make it so obvious that it's the electric version. When I'm looking at the CLA, this light bar, and like what Tesla did with the updated Model Y, they put a light bar in the front. I don't know why we're putting so many light bars on these electric vehicles to, I guess, signal that, hey, I'm an electric vehicle. I don't understand this design language. Mercedes is a lot cleaner than what I'm looking at here, especially when it comes to how they used to design a lot of their cars. They've had classic designs. This light bar in the front with this copious amounts of 3-pointed star symbols, we know it's a Mercedes. The big emblem in the front, it's a Mercedes. Do I need the headlights to look like the emblem? Do I need the grille to have small LED lights that look like the emblem? Do I need the tail lights to also look like the emblem? At no point in time would anybody confuse that giant grille and that giant badge for anything else other than a Mercedes. So I don't know why this exterior kind of looks like this. I personally think that it just can be better. The light bar function to me just is unnecessary. If they would have taken that away and maybe stretched out the headlights to kind of come to like a teardrop or something to kind of extend them, then I would say it would look a lot cleaner than what they have here. Now, the overall side profile, I guess if you get it in like a black color or something like that, it kind of hides some of it a little bit. But that light bar to me just breaks up what could be a very clean look. Now, one of the benefits of the EV version of the CLA is that you get a frunk. For the first time, you get a frunk and you get a trunk. So it's a lot of utility when it comes to hauling luggage, groceries, and things that you want to do with it. But the exterior, especially the front, the rear isn't bad. I just question why we have to have every single light resemble the badge when we already know we're in a Mercedes. But the rear of it is clean. It has a standard like giant light bar for the brake lights and driving lights, and that's standard on a lot of cars. It's just this front end that I'm like, why did we have to put an additional light bar across the front? And that's not where I'm ending my critiques here. There are more. I want to talk about this interior. So, as I've said before, Mercedes has this thing on their high-end cars, like the EQS, called the Hyper Screen, which is just giant LED screens across the entire dash, right? And if you remember, about 2 podcasts ago, I talked about the chief designer saying that he is saying screens do not dictate luxury. He was already saying as a chief designer that soon enough, as time goes on, we're going to start getting back to designing interiors with some thought. Because I've said all the time is that the screens are allowing them to get away with actually not designing much of this interior. Save for the door cards, save for the handles and the seat controls and the center console, the front dashboard on this car has massive borders on the screen. It doesn't look appropriate. It looks like an 80s boombox. This is the same thing I said about the BMW X3 or the iX3. I said it looked like Dave & Buster's. It was LED lights on there. I saw it at the Houston Auto Show and I said, it's just too much happening for what's supposed to be an interior, and why do I need to be blinded by the lights, okay? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, for the CLA, they call this the super screen. They don't call it hyper screen. So it has LED digital screen for the driver, one in the center, and then I guess one for the passenger, though the passenger one looks like it's kind of more so just showing off a design. Maybe it is a glove box, maybe it isn't a screen at all. But when you look at the air vents on the side, they almost look like they're pasted onto these giant screens. The center screen has a big enough border where I would question if this was an original iPad because these borders are crazy. And the overall design just reminds me of like an old boombox. I used to have an old JVC stereo back in the early 2000s. It had like 8-inch subwoofers and giant tubes that came out the top of it. It was called Bass Boost. That's all I could think of. All I could think of is running into an electronics store and seeing all the crazy stereo systems on the front of this car. And it isn't necessary. When we get back to designing interiors, I think that is going to be the resurgence of enjoying being inside of the cars. If all you ever see is just screens, especially on the luxury cars. I know some commodity brands like my Toyotas and Hondas and Hyundais, they don't fall into this. I'm talking about when you're talking about the high end. If I'm spending this type of money for the high end, I don't want to just see 3 giant screens on the front dashboard and you tell me that's your interior. I'm going to say we got no physical controls. The HVAC, the controls for the heat and cooling, that's all a slider on the screen on the dash. We already know the disaster of that when you look at Volkswagen. When they did all touch capacitive buttons, they figured out that that was absolutely not the right thing to do. And so now we just have a lot of screens. I don't even know how this goes for the future. And I know, speaking about a car under the idea of what it looks like 10 years from now, a lot of these people are leasing this stuff. They buy it 4 to 5 years. They don't care what happens after the fact. They're on to the next thing, or they upgrade to like a E-Class or something like that. Now, both of these cars are the one version is coming out the end of this year, and then the hybrid version is coming out in 2026. The hybrid one, I didn't get much details on that because they weren't speaking too much about it, but it's supposed to have like a 27 horsepower electric motor on top of the gas motor with a smaller like 1.3 kilowatt hour battery. It's a 1.5 liter 4-cylinder. So I think you're probably looking at like close like 250 horsepower, 240, probably very good gas mileage. But the exterior is just, man, I don't know. It just doesn't appeal to me when it comes to what Mercedes can look like. Some of the best Mercedes are like from 2015 with the S-Class. I mean, just clean, classic design. Let me get back to that. Now, continuing on with some electric car news. This is actually exciting. I was reading this and I'm like, I'm intrigued. So there was a group of people that used to work for Lucid, Tesla, BYD, and former employees came together to make a sports car company that they are hoping to release their cars sometime in 2026 in the UK market. Is it coming to the US? I don't know. I know electric cars are probably much easier to come to the US, I believe, but the safety and crash regulations are going to be what dictates whether they care about doing it or not. But the name of the company is called Longbow Electric Sports Cars, and their whole MO is about making sports cars that kind of harken back to the British sports car, similar to what I was talking about last week about Morgan and had them making a very classic British sports car. Think about Caterham, think about Ariel Adams, think about those very lightweight, bespoke sports cars that have a very big cult following for what they're known for and what they do. They're trying to recreate that, but in the electric arena. Now, here's what they're discussing. I'm going to tell you this, because some of these numbers, these are ambitious numbers. For one, they call their cars featherweight electric vehicles, FEVs, featherweight electric vehicles. Now, if we know, most electric cars are heavy. That's always the issue. Them things weigh tons of weight. Tons. They weigh tons, actually. Tons, for real. I was just looking at the review from Redline Reviews on YouTube, and they talked about the weight of the Cadillac Escalade EQL. It was 9,000 pounds. And I'm like, that's insane. Okay, because listen, you get into an accident with some of these electric cars and you're getting ran over because they just carry so much weight. So here at featherweight electric vehicles, my eyebrow propped up. I'm like, okay, featherweight? What do you mean featherweight? The first model they're thinking about releasing is called the Speedster. And the Speedster reminds me of like the Sterling Moss SLR, long nose, 2-seaters, sitting back, kind of like the Ferrari Monza SP1, No windshield. I don't know if they're what they're doing about the windshield, but this concept vehicle and this render you see here, there's no windshield. Similar to like that McLaren, what's it called there? Tura? I can't remember. There's a McLaren that has no windshield as well. But regardless, the main thing I want to talk about is they said that this car is aimed to weigh 1,973 pounds. That's absurd in an electric car. That's absurd in a gas powered car at this day and age. If you get a sports coupe under 2,000 pounds and stick it with a 300 horsepower whatever motor, everybody's gonna say we haven't had something this lightweight and this kind of aimed at drivers in years. So they're saying that their featherweight electric vehicle is going to weigh 1,973 pounds, 0 to 60, 3.5 seconds. There's a range of 275 miles by the European standards. If we switch it to EPA, it's like 233, costing $110,000. And the outside of this looks really good. Like if they come out looking like this, which would be funny because if you got former Tesla employees and they release their sports car before the Tesla Roadster, will be hilarious. But this looks good. It looks very good. I don't know how the doors open, but I can just tell if you look at this picture here that I have on the screen, just looking at the overall length of the front end. That's why I said Starling Moss, SLR, Ferrari, Monza, SP1. This all looks really good, like really, really good, especially for a startup that is just beginning. This is their first foray into sports cars. They're shooting for the stars. Now, there was another model. The next model was called, it's called the Roadster. Now, the Roadster, to me, it looks like a coupe. You can see the picture here, but I'm assuming that the roof is probably removable by some form or fashion. But this one weighs 2,194 pounds. That's still dumb light. 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, $84,000. Now listen, 84 is still for real money. But given how this looks, given the weight, I'm surprised it's $84,000. Now, that must mean that the Roadster was whatever they're doing without the windshield. I guess the cost of that one is a lot more because that's $110,000. But the Roadster is 84, the Speedster is 110. 0 to 60 time is only off by 1/10 of a second because it weighs a little bit heavier. And the motor that they're saying that they're going to be using is a 321 horsepower electric motor, and there may be a dual variant one. And they said that the suppliers and the people and the relationships that they have due to their history and their resume as working in this EV space, they have access to everyone. They said where their shop is located, they're right along the same, I guess, industrial park as Formula One providers, Formula One suppliers, engine builders, fabricators. I guess they're in the mix. Where all the top players are, they're sitting right in the middle of it. When I said ambitious, I'm talking, if you think about the cost, the weight alone is where I'm like, how are we getting to under 2,000 pounds on an EV Roadster? There must be copious amounts of carbon fiber or aluminum or some other composite material. The Roadster at under 2,500 pounds, a 2,194 pound car is light. So I'm like, how do you get there for $84,000? And then if you think about the electric aspect, obviously when you see stuff like this, our brain goes to like, man, if they figured out a way to get like a high revving 4-cylinder in there or something, that would be an amazing sports car. But I also realize that it's much, much harder to develop a compelling gas ice power motor that is well known without having it cost an outrageous amount of money. Yes, you can call Cosworth and say, hey, build us a bespoke 9,000 RPM 4-cylinder. They say, okay, I can do that. Next thing you know, this thing costs $200,000 because the motors cost $50,000 a piece. So if they keep this to this featherweight idea they have, if it truly is going to be this light at this cost, this coming to America would make a big deal because making it fun to drive is the biggest thing to do. That's what they said they're aiming for. They're not doing gimmicks. They said there won't be any faux shifting like the Ioniq 5N. There isn't going to be any pumped in sounds, I guess, but they're trying to make it so that it captures that old essence of those British sports cars in an electric area. I will say this. If there's one thing that will aim at giving driver feedback and engagement is weight. And if they can keep this at under this type of weight, then a lot of the hurdles of having engaging drives and engaging electric cars could be beat. We could be dealing with the first instance where people are driving the car saying, hey, this drives really good. This drives like a lightweight sports coupe. Now, all of this is supposed to happen in 2026. So they got about a year before we should start seeing some version of this coming out in real life. I don't know if it will. There are enough startups and electric vehicle startups that have started renders, taken deposits, and there are no vehicles on the road. So they have a lot ahead of them, but they have the resume to complete it. So if there's anybody that can pull it off, it's about the best people that can. We will see. We will see. Now, before I wrap this up, we do got some updates. We got some interesting updates too. Not the GR Corolla ones. We're going to get to that in a second. Just channel life updates. So I'm now a part of the Texas Auto Writers Association. I've made my way to getting, I told you, I'm going to get my foot in the door of reviewing press cars and reviewing cars. It is going to happen. Trust and believe. Just follow my journey, okay? This podcast is like the foundation of me following that journey. I'm talking about these cars. I'm going to be standing in front of them, talking about them soon enough. And sooner than you think, because I was able to register and be invited to the Texas Auto Writers Auto Roundup, which is an event that I've seen a couple years ago where they gather a bunch of cars from manufacturers together. And the whole idea of the event is for people that are in the media who may not have access to some of these press events and press cars to be able to drive them and review them and talk about them. So very, very soon, there's going to be a smorgasbord, okay? A fiesta, a charcuterie board of videos pertaining to cars that I'm going to review. Now, how am I going to shoot it? What I'm going to do? What's the style? All those things are going to come as I think about it as the weeks come on, but it's coming very soon that I'm going to be at this event. I'm going to be reviewing. I don't know what cars are going to be there. I don't care what cars are going to be. They can be Toyota Camrys and Accords. I'm excited. I'm a car person all the way. It doesn't matter what car it is. It isn't just sports cars. If they say, here are the keys to the new Kia K4 for a week, I'm going to be rubbing my hands together like it was a Z06. Okay. I'm excited to just the challenge of seeing certain cars that maybe they don't excite you, but how do you talk about them for the people that it's intended for? Because everything can't be, Longbow featherweight electric vehicles. All cars can't be Supras and sports cars and everything else that it's easy to get excited about. What about when you have something that's like commodity? This is for the regular person who really isn't into sports cars or any high performance stuff. We just want to get from point A to B. So I'm a part of that auto roundup. It's my first time going there. I'm a mix and mingle. Like I said, I have the business card. I'm running up on all people that review cars, talk about them. And I'm going to say, hey, how can I get involved further? Show me some tips. Give me some tricks. Show me something. So I'm excited for that. Everything is going according to plan. Everything is going how I said it would, and I'm just putting in my 10,000 hours. Episode 88 is here. We're making our way up to 100, and we're going to make our way up to 200, 300, 400. I'm going to keep going until I can't. Now, before I leave, GR Corolla updates. Don't have any. We did the throttle install I talked about, and then I was on a trip for business, and then I came back. So I haven't even really driven the car that much. I hung out at Catalina real quick and came back home. So I haven't done anything yet. Suspension is really what's on my mind. I want to do something for the community to kind of show them options they have. And I talked about this before when it comes to the cost of certain things. That is I'm trying to build. I've now have a very good vision of how I want this car build to go and how I want the channel to go for people who have GR Corollas, and to give them a basis of certain things that they can do that are for the everyday person who's into modifying cars and isn't just throwing caution to the wind or has a budget of 50 grand. It's like, listen, I'm ripping the motor out and putting big turbo on there. Now, if I get to that point, I'll do it. But in the meantime, I'm going to work my way up there so people can see, hey, here's some things you can do to enjoy your car just a little bit more. Just a little bit more, just a little extra sazon on there, okay? Nothing crazy, just a little bit. Now, until then, until I get to that auto roundup, until you see me reviewing more cars, there's going to be a whole list of vehicles. If you've never seen me even attempt this, there are some videos on my YouTube channel called Past the Fob, which is my series of dealing with cars. I did it in Mexico. I was there visiting family. I was all the way in Mexico, and I stopped at the BYD dealership to deal with and talk about the cars they had there. And the next time I did one of those video series, I did it when I was at the SEMA show, when I was talking about the 2025 GR Corolla, as well as the Celica they had that had the G16E GTS motor inside of it. So I've done 2 of those series. The third one I'm going to do before this auto roundup is going to be on our own minivan, the Sienna, because we have hit a very big threshold of mileage, and I'm sure everybody's going to want to know, how has this thing held up after almost 4 years? Actually, no, it's been 4 years. 4 years of ownership, near 100,000 miles. I'm going to tell you how amazing this thing is, because I really don't have nothing else bad to say. This thing has absolutely done everything we've asked for it to do, and we've put miles on it to put the stamp of approval. And I'm going to put another 100 to 200,000 on it again. So that's going to come up, and that's going to be a part of that whole series. And this is going to be, I'm hoping this year is my catalyst, is my launch pad into the review channels. More of it in there in conjunction with the GR Corolla, in conjunction with the podcast. I'm putting all the automotive content under the CarQuicks umbrella, okay? Join me on this journey. But until then, do as you wish and do as you may. Thanks for joining me again for another episode of the CarQuicks Podcast. I'll see y'all again next week. Peace.